Bill Carroll, Zenny62 Media, and I'm excited about the draft class of pass rushers. Now, I want to make it clear that I target and highlight players that I think will go from the end of the third round and on. So basically, people who will be drafted in the hundreds and later. For two reasons. One is it's more exciting to me to find the next, you know, Arthur Moats, or to find, since I'm sticking to the sort of pass rush types, or Bryce Huff or Matthew Judon, because everybody's going to be talking about the guys at the top of the draft. You know, it's fun to talk about the guys too, but I get my real focus. I get my focus and I get my real excitement from guys I'm about to talk about, right? Like San Diego State's Trey White, and one of those classic steady improvement kind of stories. He was a guy who redshirted his first year as a freshman, then became a leader of the scout team, right, and a special teamer, and then eventually becomes a team captain. And then last year breaks out massively, right, in his redshirt junior year. Last year, massive season, 12 games, 12 starts. First time, I think it's the first time he ever started all 12 games, because I think he only had one start, I think, coming in, right? Because, like I said, being special teams, terrific player on special teams. He had 40 solo tackles and 20 assists, which is what I look for, right? If I see 2-1, that tells me that, once again, he gets there first. 18 and a half tackles for loss, 12 and a half sacks, and a forced fumble. And, of course, he won't be sneaking up on people next year, but I still think he's going to be really good and productive. And he's the leading sacker in the FBS, and he's not being talked about that much for reasons I'll never truly understand. One of the leading sackers in the FCS is Skelby Gibbons from Southern. And twice now he's dipped his toe in the transfer portal, but assuming he continues to stay at Southern, he's likely to own all the records at Southern before it's all said and done, in terms of pressures, tackles for loss, sacks, name something. He just puts up double-digit sack year after double-digit sack year after double-digit sack year. I think he may end up being in position to perhaps be the SWAC's leading sacker if he has a big year this year. I'll have to go back and check to see where he is in the all-time numbers for the conference, but I think he was the best defensive prospect in the conference, bar none, last year, and was, didn't put up the numbers of the year prior where he was, a consensus All-American the year prior, but he's still a person who's made 3 times in a row, made at least some level of All-American, whether it be first or second team. And I could see him having a 4-time, right? 4-time All-American at the FCS level. Next is a player who did transfer. Didn't just test it, but Alcorn's Malachi Bailey is now at Arizona. I guess he likes schools beginning with A. But in his career at Alcorn State, he had 128 total tackles, 69 solo, 59 assists. Still more solo than assist. 46 and a half tackles for loss and 28 career sacks. 3 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries. And go back and watch the Prairie View game, right? Just unstoppable. Go back and watch the Texas Southern game. As good a game as I saw anyone pass rush wise in the entire Southwestern Athletic Conference of SWAC last year. He's going to have a monster year, I believe, in his new home, Arizona State. Another player who did transfer, in fact, got a bonus year due to the JUCO clawback year, is Keyshawn James-Newby, previously of Montana Tech and Idaho, now finds his way to his forever home. Well, at least forever for this last year of eligibility, in the Lobos of New Mexico. Once again, good player throughout his time, right? As a junior, a redshirt junior, in 11 games, 38 tackles, 12 solo tackles, 7 tackles for loss, and 5 sacks, 5 hurries, and a couple of pass breakups. But then last year, all Big Sky, and made many FCS All-American teams, including the AFCA's All-American team. In 13 games, had 65 tackles, 36 of them solo, so still more than half, 14 and a half tackles for loss, 10 and a half sacks, 13 hurries, pass breakup. Also, once again, against Montana State, that's a terrific team, right? In the playoffs, look at that game: 7 tackles, 4 hurries, a sack, right? That's a big time game. He had year after year, game after game. Like Abilene Christian's a good program. Look at the game he had against them, right? Another 7-tackle game. Had a 7-tackle game against Eastern Washington. Against Wyoming, playing up a level against the FBS, had 4 tackles, right? 3 sacks and a forced fumble in a game that they won over the Wyoming Cowboys while he was at Idaho. Now, Idaho has obviously bounced back and forth, the Vandals, between the FBS and FCS, but they are currently an FCS program. Another big-time transfer is Braden Manley, formerly of Mercer. Shout out to my Mercer graduate friend, Donovan James. He was the SoCon Defensive Player of the Year last year and one of the top FCS pass rushers. And that was just as a sophomore, redshirt sophomore. Last year, he had 38 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks, 10 hurries, 2 fumble recoveries, a forced fumble, 2 pass breakups. And Mercer had his best year in a very long time. Now, he's another one of those players who's sort of a quote-unquote tweener. He's probably 244 pounds. He's probably 6'1.5". I'm saying I don't care, but most of these guys are on the smaller side. I'm going to get to one of the bigger guys in a second. But most of them are in that sort of tweener range. They're 226 to 247, right? They're in that 2025. Most of these guys are pushing 250 at the most, for a few exceptions. I'm going to jump to a rangy guy, right? Got that Matt Blair build. Shout out to the late, great Matt Blair, who deserves more votes, more consideration for Hall of Fame. Maybe not to make it, but should be at least maybe a semifinalist. But Ashad Hall had a terrific career at South Carolina State, a fantastic program that's really good at developing defensive players, right? A lot of great defensive players have come from South Carolina State, and this has not ended. Now he makes his way to Texas El Paso. He's wiry, right? Probably about 233 pounds, about 6'3 3/4. But Ashad Hall really understands rushing the passer and isn't just a pass rusher. He's not a guy who just does that, right? He's able to do multiple things at a high level. I think that he's off to he's probably going to play more like a traditional linebacker for UTEP than he did, where he almost played like a drop end at South Carolina State. But listen to me now and hear me later, as Hans and Franz used to say. I think he's in line for a big, big, big time year. Then another player who transferred within the FBS, Eric O'Neill, started his career, I believe, as a walk-on at Long Island University. Makes his way from there to James Madison, and then makes his way from there now to Rutgers. I'm expecting him to have a very, very, very big season. And just to put in perspective, like last year, he had 11 solo sacks in 13 games. And once again, he's a guy that keeps moving up, but keeps producing at each level where he is. Then had 3 assist sacks, but he also is a player that's good against the run. He's not one of those people who's just a specialist who's, goes away against the run. Jay-Sean Alston is a player I really, really like. He's a D2 prospect, which means he may not even get drafted no matter what he does, which is somewhat unfair, but I think I'm projecting him to get invited to at least the Legacy Bowl, hopefully the Shrine Game, and, fingers crossed maybe in the Senior Bowl. But last year, he had 29 tackles, 8 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, a couple forced fumbles, was the sack leader in the CIAA conference, and was second team, quizzically, all CIAA. But he's a player I truly believe in. And he's another guy that, could afford to get a little bigger, but there's a lot to like, and I think that if he continues to produce at this level, somebody will give him a chance. Another player that I'm really, really a big fan of, and this is a guy that has the frame, right, a bigger frame, is Ricky Freeman. Ricky Freeman is a player who I think when most people get a look at him, right, he's in the RMAC conference, which is a very solid conference. Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference, Austin Eckler, and many others have come out of that conference. Last year, he was an All-American, first team All-Academic, as well as football, for football in the RMAC, and was just a D2 finalist for the Cliff Harris Award, was in the running for, was a Walter Camp All-American. And he's got a big frame. He's 6'4 1/4, about 263 pounds. Looks the part, as they say. And I think that, Kyle Vanden Bosch-esque, if you want to figure out sort of who he could be. But 34 solo tackles, 35 assists. He's a true defensive end, right? He's not one of those guys who's kind of a hybrid player. He's a true defensive end and can do a little bit of everything. He was up there in block kicks also, right? So he's going to be a guy who can help you also in special teams. I'm a huge fan of Ricky Freeman, and I think he's going to have another monster year. What's not to like, right? Another sort of bigger bodied guy is Matt Spatney. He is now at Lehigh. No, I guess he's always at Lehigh. I think he might have tested the portal. I think he stayed at Lehigh. Was first team All Conference in the Patriot League and was an honorable mention All American at the FCS level. Last year he had 12 starts, 11.5 sacks, which is obviously one of the tops in the nation. The game against Princeton. Now, is it Princeton at their very best? Maybe not, but 2.5 sacks, 7 tackles. 10.5 of his sacks came in home games, which is sort of an interesting thing. He has to maybe balance that out a little bit more. Makes you a little concerned, but he's a guy who's probably going to come in at about 6'1.5", about 258 pounds, and is efficient with his use of hands. Has some good power and pop in his hands. There's an NFL home somewhere out there for him, and we'll see where that is, obviously, in the future. But there's a lot to, in my mind, a lot to like about him. A few other players that I want to give some love, attention, and time to, who I think have a legitimate chance to be somewhere, right? Somewhere in this NFL. Back to Givens just for one more second. This is a guy who was everybody game plan for last year and still had, depending upon whose stats you believe, either 26.5 or 27.5 tackles for loss. I just feel like, with everybody having a target on his back, I think Givens is in line for a monster year. Two other players that I'm really interested in, and I want to see sort of what happens with them. I've started really studying Cleb Lubin. I paid a little bit of attention to him last year, and now he finds his way to Louisville. Louisville's done a good job in the portal, right? If you're looking for a team to sort of tag as a team that could take a leap to being at least a fringe contender for the FBS playoffs, watch out for them. Lubin had a monster year last year, and now he makes his way up, to Louisville. Things that I noticed when I watched Lubin on tape is really good first step, right? And last year in just 10 games, he had 9 sacks. Also helped out on one, so that's 9.5 if you want to count that way. Still good against the run. My only real questions is his frame. Another guy that I sort of wonder just how much weight he can effectively carry, but definitely understands rushing the passer and could easily be a double-digit guy. He played the bandit position, which once again is sort of that drop-in hybrid kind of player, but was an Iowa Western Community College guy, which has produced a lot of people, including, I think, Helgerson, right? Dana Helgerson back in the day. But listed at 245. I feel like he's probably in the upper 230s. Listed at 6'3", I think he's probably more like 6'2" and 3/8. But that's, once again, I don't care that much about that. I just, once again, he looks like a guy that still I'm excited about, and I want to see sort of what the future holds for him. And I'm going to close out with one other guy who's an underclassman. I only talk about underclassmen, but I truly believe they might have an opportunity to have the kind of year that will put them, into the draft. And I think that Suntarine Perkins could be that kind of player. Another guy whose body type is, not the biggest, but played defensive line. But he's played some linebacker as well. He's another guy sort of a tweener. 209, right? That listed at 209. Could be a little heavier now, right? That maybe he's bigger now than he was. But, I'm taken back to a kid named Corey Bird, who was one of the top pass rushers in the country years ago at Virginia Tech, who was, I think, 5'10 and a half or 5'10 and 3/4 and 214 pounds. The issue is, what do you do with a player like him? Right? What do you do with a player like him? But he was an honorable mention All-American, 3rd team All-SEC, freshman of the year, just a fun player, right? And now he's rounding into what will be his redshirt junior year, redshirted, was a redshirt freshman in 2024 and had a big year. Sorry, redshirt sophomore. Right, redshirt sophomore year, I guess. So So, unlikely to declare, especially since there's so many questions about just what he is physically. But he's a player that's going to be, like, I'm going to watch a lot, and I'm going to ask questions a lot about him. But look at his best games, right? Had a big game against Kentucky, had a couple tackles for loss, total of 5 solo tackles and an assist against LSU. 5 total tackles, 3 solo, a half a tackle for loss against Oklahoma. That was the game that really put him on my radar. Like I was like, who is this guy? 8 tackles, right? 8 solo tackles, 11 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss. That was the game that like I was like, who is this? Just an absolute monster game, right? 2 sacks against Kentucky, 4 sacks against Oklahoma. Now, admittedly, a lot of that production just came in those 2 games that he had that year. Also posted a sack against Georgia and had one against Wake Forest. So it's sort of polarized, where he produced and how he produced. But he's on my watch list. So those are the guys I'm going to talk about today, or have talked about today. I will be delving more deeply into this class as the year goes along. But once again, I'm focusing on guys that right now are late third, at least on my board, late thirds on down. But obviously, some of them can play themselves higher. Some of them can play themselves lower based on what happens this season. But I'll have more for you soon. Once again, Bill Carroll, Ziddy62 Media. Please subscribe to Ziddy62 Media. Please like and also subscribe and share with your friends.